As the Count entered the lobby, he noticed 4 men in evening dress coming through the door with black leather cases in hand, clearly one of the string quartets that occasionally played in the private dining rooms upstairs. 3 of the musicians looked as if they had been performing together since the 19th century, sharing the same white hair and weary professionalism. But the second violinist stood out from the others, as he couldn't have been more than 22 and retained a certain brightness to his step. It was only as the quartet approached the elevator that the Count recognized him. The Count probably hadn't seen Nikolai Petrov since 1914, when the prince had been no more than a lad of 13, and given the passage of time, the Count might not have recognized him at all were it not for his unassuming smile, a distinguishing feature of the Petrov line for generations. "Nikolai?" When the Count spoke, the 4 musicians turned from the elevator and eyed him with curiosity. "Alexander Ilyich?" the prince asked after a moment. "None other." The prince encouraged his colleagues to go ahead and then offered the Count the familial smile. "It's good to see you, Alexander." "And you." They were quiet for a moment. Then the prince's expression changed from one of surprise to curiosity. "Is that ice cream?" "What? Oh, yes, it is, though not for me." The prince nodded in bemusement, but without further remark. "Tell me," the Count ventured, "have you heard from Dmitri? I believe he is in Switzerland." "Ah," said the Count with a smile, "the purest air in Europe." The prince shrugged, as if to say he had heard something of the sort, but wouldn't know firsthand. "The last time I saw you," observed the Count, "you were playing Bach at one of your grandmother's dinner parties." The prince laughed and held up his case. "I guess I am still playing Bach at dinner parties." Then he gestured toward the departed elevator and said with unmistakable fondness, "That was Sergei Eisenov." "No." At the turn of the century, Sergei Eisenov had given music lessons to half the boys on the Boulevard Ring. "It's not easy for our likes to find work," said the prince, "but Sergei hires me when he can." The Count had so many questions. Were there other members of the Petrov family still in Moscow? Was his grandmother alive? Was he still living in that wonderful house on Pushkin Square? But the 2 were standing in the middle of a hotel lobby as men and women headed up the stairs, including some in formal clothes. "They'll be wondering what's become of me," said the prince. "Yes, of course. I didn't mean to keep you." The prince nodded and turned to mount the stairs, but then turned back. "We are playing here again on Saturday night," he said. "Perhaps we could meet afterwards for a drink." "That would be splendid," said the Count. Among readers of European fiction, the character names in Russian novels are notorious for their difficulty. Not content to rely on given and family names, we Russians like to make use of honorifics, patronymics, and an array of diminutives, such that a single character in one of our novels may be referred to in 4 different ways in as many pages. To make matters worse, it seems that our greatest authors, due to some deep-rooted sense of tradition or a complete lack of imagination, constrain themselves to the use of 30 given names. You cannot pick up a work of Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, or Turgenev without bumping into an Anna, an Andrei, or an Alexander. Thus it must be with some trepidation that our Western reader meets any new character in a Russian novel, knowing that in the remote chance this character plays an important role in future chapters, he must now stop and commit the name to memory. As such, I think it only fair to inform you now that while Prince Nikolai Petrov has agreed to meet the Count on Saturday night for a drink, he will not be keeping the appointment. For when the quartet finishes their engagement at midnight, young Prince Nikolai will button his overcoat, tighten his scarf, and walk to his family's residence on Pushkin Square. Needless to say, when he arrives at 12:30, there are no footmen to greet him. With his violin in hand, he mounts the staircase headed toward the room on the 4th floor that is being left to his use. Though the house seems empty, on the 2nd floor Nikolai comes upon 2 of the house's newer residents smoking cigarettes. Nikolai recognizes one of them as the middle-aged woman who now lives in the nursery. The other is the bus operator with a family of 4 who lives in his mother's boudoir. When the prince wishes them a good night with the unassuming smile of the house, neither says a word. But when he reaches the 4th floor, he understands their reticence and can hardly blame them. For standing in the hallway are 3 men from Cheka waiting to search his room.